Hello, this is Lauren from Wearing History. I have a tutorial for you today of how to thread mark pleats for things like skirts or other types of garment. Thread marking is a method that you can use that doesn't include any kind of pin or any kind of chalk. It's something you can use for all different types of fabric. So the first thing you need to do is transfer your marks to your pattern pieces. I do this after I've cut my pattern out, but before I start serging or doing any sort of seam finishing. So you are going to have to use some kind of chalk or some kind of marking method initially. You can use thread for the initial marks, but I find it easier to use my chalk. The benefit of thread marking is that you can then work from both sides of each piece and see the mark on both sides exactly in the same spot. So you go in and out with a thread, and in that way you can make sure that the line is exactly the same on the front and the back of the piece. So you can see that I've put my pin through both layers. I make it go straight down so that it's coming exactly at the same spot. I'll then draw a line. If you need something like the end of a dart, then you'll need to do a cross mark. So some of these I needed to do cross marks to make sure that the end of the stitching line was marked. I'm making a cross there for my button. And then this is the bottom of the pleat down here. You can keep comparing it to the pattern piece, like you see me flipping it up and then flipping it back, because there is a lot of markings on this particular skirt pattern. This is the Montana skirt available on my site. I then will fold it back, and I won't fold it back enough for the pin to come straight out. I'll just make sure that the pin's just barely in there, and then I'll mark it again. That is at the center of the button. Then I pull it down again, and I see my little pin, so I mark that, and I do a cross mark on the ones that have the stitching. The stitching is indicated on the pattern with lines of dots. Then I'll mark the center of my pleat. So my ruler isn't long enough to go all the way from the top to bottom. That's why you'll see that I have to split it up. My ruler is 18 inches long. So whatever size ruler you're using, try to space it about so that you can mark it and connect the dots after they're all marked. Okay, then I take the pattern piece off and I get my clear ruler and I've got my chalk. Make sure that you test this on a scrap first to make sure the chalk will come out. Sometimes chalk like this will not come out of certain things, like white wool does not like yellow chalk. Ask me how I know. So we mark the lines and we're connecting the dots, and this particular pattern, the curves are slightly tapered, but there's a little bit of a curve up at the top where the stitch line ends, so you want to make sure that you get those critical points so that the lines are as they are on your pattern. Sometimes the chalk will come off a little bit as you're working, so go and remark things as you need to. And try not to handle the pieces too much when they have just the chalk marking, because like I said, with the friction, the chalk will come off of certain types. This is a chambray, a cotton, so it doesn't really stick like it would on something like a wool. Then you're going to flip it over. You're going to find the marks that you made. It's hard to see it here on this video, but you're going to have to take my word that I'm connecting the dots that I made with my pins and then my markings that you just saw. And notice that I have both pieces together. You can separate them at this point, but I find that the separation sometimes will make the chalk kind of come off. Of course, it does a little bit when you're moving around to mark as well. So just try not to handle them too much. If you wanted to thread mark, like I said, the little spaces to connect, you can do that, but you really need to draw these lines in some way for your thread marking to be exactly where you want it to be. At the top of my pattern there where I'm connecting it to, I made a little snip in like I do for my notches. So I would then connect it from the dot to the snip. So you can see that I'm saying don't mark the middle pleat because that one doesn't need a cross mark. You can mark it straight all the way down. For whatever pattern you're using this for, you can use different methods. Then you're going to get your thread and your needle. Use a contrasting thread. If you're doing this in wool, there's actually a special kind of thread you can buy that's it's like a Japanese cotton thread. It's really nice and it comes in different colors. You'll have to probably order away for it. They don't carry it in most craft stores unless they're very high end. So I did a little loop-the-loop there where I started just to hold it in place, but not be an actual knot. And then I go in and out big stitches. If your fabric has a front and a back, you can do longer stitches on one side and shorter stitches on the other side, so you can keep track of which one's the front and which one's the back. That's beneficial when your pieces look really similar. But for this one, I'm just doing big old running stitches. And the purpose of this is just to mark where my lines are. So for skirts that have, I'm making my cross mark here. That's the end of where my stitching will be for the top of the skirt. You can watch that again if you need to. Mine looks real fancy. You can do anything as long as you do some sort of cross mark at that point. That's a very critical point on the construction of this particular pattern. Then I keep going in and out, all the way down. For your buttons, you do like this. You're going to make sure that the center X of your button is where you attach, that's where your button center is. So where those intersect at the center is where you want to sew your button. You can do this for jackets as well. So right there. All right, thanks for watching. Hope this was helpful. You can find my patterns on wearinghistory.clothing or wearing history on Etsy for e-patterns.